Welcome to All Worn Out. I'm your host, Warren Meredith. On the show today, local legend, Slo Tom Stewart has been an incredible member of the Ottawa music community for a long time. Back in the 90s, FurnaceFace was burning up the scene across the country. Tours, multiple albums, music videos. Now, Slo Tom is a proud member of Slo Tom and the Handsome Devils. You gotta check out that hardcore country. Let's get into it now with Slo Tom. Hi, everybody. Welcome to All Worn Out. It's a podcast about music. It's a podcast about what you're passionate about. And it's a podcast about what our guest is passionate about. We are lucky, thrilled, over the moon, losing our minds. We have the undeniably, irrefutably, the incredible Tom Stewart, a.k.a. you know him as Slo Tom. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing good. Couldn't be happier to be here.
Thrilled to have you on. And let me get right to the point, folks. When I started this podcast, Tom was one of the first people in my mind where I was like, I need to ask this person questions about the Ottawa music scene and his story. And I'll show you I'm serious. So my career goes back a little while, and this is Tom's influence on me in the very beginning. So this is at Zaphods, and this is my first band, just like before. And he gave us these awesome guitar setups, or $20 off or whatever it was, but I wanted it just for the autograph, to be honest with you. And I kept it because it's my first band ever, and he was my best friend, and we just learned so much. And then the second thing I wanted to show off was that Tom would always record the sets. And I think this was genius. And everybody who still does this or allows bands to have this in any capacity, I'm like, it's huge. It's humbling. It's important to go home and realize that you were a little bit drunk and that, and it's important to hear your mistakes because you can't get better otherwise.
It's absolutely true.
So thank you so much.
Welcome. That was from when I was the house tech at Zaphods.
Correct.
And I got to do sound for all kinds of great local bands and, kind of network and keep my ear to the ground. So it was great. And I really enjoyed it. And I talked Eugene, the owner, into, and this was sort of, like double CD burners were still kind of a thing, right? And so I talked him into renting one, and then I could burn CDs as the bands were playing, and the bands loved it,
Yeah, well, I did. I absolutely loved it, and I would tell everyone back then, like, yeah, it's Monday night, but it's worth it. Like, go do it. And I have another CD that you did for Ginger Fox.
Oh yeah,
and that one is actually even more meaningful to me because we hit a song correctly. Mm-hmm. We hit a song live the way that we envisioned it, and that was a nice early memory again of getting something right that you want to do as a musician, right? So going back, that was 2008, but Tom's career was already massive, already established. You'd already done incredible things. So let's go back. Even further, where were you born?
I was born in Ottawa at the Grace Hospital, actually, and I live on Preston Street now, so I'm like literally 10-minute walk from the place I was born.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And did you went to school in Ottawa?
I was in Ottawa just for kindergarten and grade 1, I guess, or grade 2, and then my father was in the military, so we lived out in Halifax for 5 years. And then we lived in Petawawa, and then we were back in Ottawa. But I've spent my entire adult life in Ottawa.
Okay, cool. Yesterday's guest was a military brat as well. We've had a few musicians on here who were military brats. Yeah. To be honest, they're some of the most talented, like Brian Stevenson or Emma Lamontang or yourself. It's interesting. Do you think you had to like reintroduce yourself to people a lot? Was that a thing?
No, to be fair, I'm not really like a military brat in the same kind of way. Because my dad was in the medical, so he wasn't like a gung-ho soldier kind of guy. He was really mellow, very permissive, very liberal. The other thing is that we only ever one time lived on military bases when we lived in Petawawa, which was only for 3 years. But all the rest of my life, we lived, I didn't go to Germany or any of the typical things that Canadian, military brats had done. Like, we never did any of that kind of stuff. It just wasn't part of my father's career. And so Yeah, my dad was in the military, but I didn't, I only very briefly lived on a military base and went to a military school, any of those kind of things. So I have a lot less in common with military brat, than typical middle class suburban kids,
And you said he wasn't really strict. It wasn't
super permissive.
It wasn't, like the story of the Doors guy, Jim Morrison, and his father being super strict and that helping to push him into a rebel. But you were a punk in the early days. Would you consider yourself first a punk?
I would, but I've never really bought the whole, you have to look a certain way or you have to dress a certain way. I mean, I genuinely really love music. Punk rock changed my life for sure. I mean, that was when I kind of became who I am. But, before that was British Invasion stuff, Beach Boys. I love country music, obviously. And so, I like to think I have I don't like too much of like that you have to wear the uniform kind of thing,
Can you remember your first powerful musical memory? So this would be like the very first time that you can remember music striking you. So I always tell this story. I was 3. I was in a crib with my babysitter and her 2 daughters were 16 and they were playing La Bamba and they were dancing and getting me to dance and sing. And so that's like the first striking musical memory I have where it just won't go away.
I think my parents didn't have a lot of records, but they had some really, really good records, and those really stuck with me. And I had a little record player that I could put my own records on, and I had some Beatles singles and stuff like that. So that was part of it. But I think that the thing that sticks in my mind is when I was very young, like maybe kindergarten. For some reason, I think I was sick, and I was supposed to be. I was staying at home. And I had or someone in my family, one of the other kids, had a little harmonica. It was shaped like a banana. And I remember playing that thing and just thinking, I'm a genius. This sounds so, because, you can't play a wrong note, right? You can't play a wrong note. And I just thought, this all sounds so good. I'm brilliant,
That's great.
But then I realized I wasn't.
hey, that's great. That inspired you to be great.
Yeah,
and
I don't know. But I always did. I always really did. Like my oldest brother was a huge influence on me because he had a bunch of really formative records. Like he had CCR, he had the Woodstock album, he had Paranoid by Black Sabbath, like literally the week it came out, Wow. So I was I remember being 3 years old or 4 years old, I guess, and hearing Iron Man and thinking, what is this? Who is this guy that's like out in outer space and like I was trying to figure it out, and I remember, I distinctly remember the first time I heard Neil Young. My brother brought home, I forget which Neil Young record. It might have been after the Gold Rush or whatever, but I remember listening to it and it was just like, what is this? This sounds crazy. Who's singing? I got to hear more of this. This is so weird. It was just really strange, but that stuff really resonated with me. I think more than a lot of people would just hear it like, oh yeah, whatever, but that stuff really stuck with me.
So you were a bass player first by choice?
Well, when I first started getting into music, I met my best friend, who was the first person who played me the Sex Pistols, changed my life. And he was a drummer. So I thought, well, I can't be a drummer. If he's a drummer, I can't play guitar. That's for sure. So I thought, well, the bass, that can't be that hard, So yeah, I ended up with bass kind of by default,
Interesting.
But I've always kind of had the attitude of what I'm bringing to a band is my songwriting. And it's like, these are the real musicians. And then I just kind of flog along beside them.
How do you songwrite with the bass?
Oh, well, I mean, no, but I mean, in those bands, we wrote together. And, I drove a lot of that songwriting. And obviously in the country stuff, I write it myself on guitar. But I guess what my point was is I always felt that what I was bringing to the was not musicianship so much as the creative songwriting part of it, And if I can plunk away on the bass, that is fine.
Well, people should definitely listen to FurnaceFace if they haven't. Wow. What an experience. I'll be honest with you.
It was a crazy experience, I tell you, man.
That's some fantastically creative music. and really good though. See, that's the thing. You could say like music is really creative, but it's like,
Now, did you never saw the band?
I never
We were
got
done by
to.
the time.
I never got to. I think you guys went till 2000.
Our last tour was 2000. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first single was fall of '89, and the last tour was 2000. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had no idea I was even going to do music in that at that time at all. You know. But I would tell people like honestly, there's 5 albums and they're all fantastic. And one song that like stuck out to me was the Shaky Thing song on the first album, because I was like, is this hip hop? I was like, is this like punk hip hop? Like I that's what I mean about your music is there's
Pat and I wrote that song. We were touring in the States and we had 2 Dodge Darts and with slant 6s. And so the front Dodge Dart was our friend Andrew and Dave Dudley, the drummer. And in the back Dodge Dart was me and Pat. And so we were driving. I remember we were on an interstate somewhere between like Detroit and Chicago or whatever. And Pat and I started writing Shaky Thing. We came up with this thing. We put it all together or whatever. It's like, oh, we're going to have a rap song.
It's there.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty good.
People loved it. It was so good live. Yeah. It was a really great live one. Yeah.
It reminded me a little bit of like the flavor that Tom Green's rap album had back in the day. Similar flavor.
I played with FurnaceFace.
Awesome.
For sure.
Very
I've
cool.
known Tom since like when he was at CHUO and doing all his radio stuff. And
Yeah, I went to Algonquin College, so I was lucky enough that I did get to have Ron Cormack, who just passed in 2023, but I had basically the same legendary staff that worked with Tom and worked with Norm Macdonald briefly, very briefly. But still, these people do come through, and I tell people Ottawa's filled with like incredibly amazingly talented people.
Yeah. And Tom Green still comes in, Spaceman, the music store where I work. And, we're online all the time. He's a great guy.
Okay, so Spaceman, that's where you've worked there for a while?
Well, yeah, it's kind of complicated. Well, not that complicated. The store was originally called Songbird.
Okay.
And it's a store in Ottawa that sells mostly used guitars, amps, keyboards, that kind of stuff. And we trade and consign and buy and sell, that kind of stuff. And so I worked for Songbird for about 15 years. And then they had an absentee. We also had a store in Toronto. So there was the Ottawa store and we had a Queen Street store. And the owner was sort of an absentee owner. And he was going to close the Ottawa store and concentrate on the Toronto store. So me and a couple other staff members basically took it over. And so everything stayed the same. We just changed the name to Spaceman. And it's been 15 years. We're still in business. We haven't gone under yet. So
I love Spaceman.
Yeah, I feel pretty lucky. It's pretty fun place. So I've crazily enough, I've worked there for 30 years. Isn't that nuts?
That's
fixing
really
the amps. I'm fixing the amps. You got a busted tube amp? I'll fix it.
That's pretty cool. That's a thing. Like tube amps aren't around very much anymore, and man, they're awesome. And when like we went and recorded, and like our producer was like, "So these are high watts. This is what we're gonna record on," and they're like. He's like, they're 75 or 78 high watts or whatever they were. And I had no idea. And then afterwards, I remember we'd show people the album. People would just randomly tell me, they go, it sounds like Zeppelin for some reason. I'd be like, yeah, that's because of the exact same guitar tone. Like it's the exact same, So amps are so cool.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a terrible way to get rich, I'll tell you that. But
oh, well, music, I would say that's just music in general. I mean... I don't know, but this is the thing I can ask you. So one thing I saw was that you guys sold out 2 runs of cassette tapes. And then you guys ended up having a new set. Like you had to go and like redo the song kind of, and then you re-released again.
I think what you're talking about is Just Buy It, the second record, right?
Okay, yeah.
So the first record, just to back up a little bit, this was with FurnaceFace. So the first single came out in fall of '89. So the single was called Sucked into Drugland.
Yeah.
And then a second single came out and then a cassette. This is so long time ago, people, that you could actually put out a record on a cassette and tour Canada.
It's awesome.
And so cassette into 7 inches, we toured Canada a couple times on that. And that record's called Let It Down. And then we recorded Just Buy It. So for that, we put it out on cassette first. And then Bob Wiseman from Blue Rodeo heard it, and he said, this is a really good record. what do you say? You come down to Toronto and let me remix it. I think I can make it sound a little bit better. We'll change the order and we'll prep it, to be put on CD. And CDs were still relatively new at that time. And so he did that. And then we had it, we had it mastered by, I forget his name, but he's the same guy that did like recorded the Cowboy Junkies famous record.
Yeah.
Michael, I can't remember. Anyways. And so then we put that out on CD, and then that's when Nirvana happened and everything blew up, and suddenly we went from playing to 50 people to playing to 500 people a night, from, to 100 people to 1,000 people a night, just like overnight, just boom, it happened.
How did it go on radio? Did it?
Well, what happened was, we had a distribution deal with Cargo Records. That was our deal. And then when Nirvana, and we, we were touring Canada and we were doing our thing. And
so when you say like touring Canada, how many dates? Like, are you doing?
We go out for between 3 and 5 weeks.
Oh,
so,
wow.
between 20 and 30 shows. It would all depend on it. And we tour every fall and every spring. Was our usual thing.
Wicked.
And so, we'd done a couple of tours with the first record, and then just by it came out, we did at least one. And then May of 91 happened. And, so we were pretty established in the underground. We could draw the 100 people in Regina and the, 50 people in Saskatoon or whatever. And we were super happy with that. It was like, oh, this is so much more successful than we ever thought,
Yeah.
And then what happened was, Nirvana broke, and suddenly what we were doing was cool. It was not a weird thing. It was suddenly a cool thing. And so what happened was, the record company, I guess it was MCA or whoever had the rights to, like, they wanted the rights to Nirvana's first record, Bleach.
Okay.
And Bleach was distributed by Cargo.
Oh.
So Cargo said to the major label, which I think was, what doesn't matter, whoever they were, said to him, look, we will let you distribute Bleach.
Yeah.
But you have to take our 3 biggest sellers. You got to take, and at the time, just by coincidence, it was us, SNFU, and Shadowy Men at a Shadowy Planet, right?
Wow.
So suddenly, we're still distributed through Cargo, but we're distributed through MCA, but still getting paid from the Cargo thing. So suddenly, we're in the front rack of every store across Canada. Our video blew up. We were on Much Music, heavy rotation, and it was just an overnight thing. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that was just luck. That we could have done the exact same thing 5 years before, 5 years later, nothing would have happened. It was just perfect timing. Oh. And so we were super lucky, And then we just realized, oh, there's this thing happening, and we can, we're already established. We've got a bit of cred, and so we just said, okay, we can ride this thing. But we always kind of knew it's like, it's not going forever,
Interesting.
But a lot of younger bands really believed, like, oh, this is it, we're going to sign whatever you put in front of us and we're going to be rich, and we're just like, oh, kids, you better take it easy,
Yeah, it's...
Anyways, it was great, but it was fantastic. And so we were a band for like 11 years. The last tour was 2000, and we did the 5 records, and it was amazing. It was so great. And Pat and I and Dave are still like, we're brothers,
I think that it might be like the most cool part of it is that you still get to share that bond with those people, because I mean, all the touring you've done, I think it's like what bands dream about today, what they wish they could do. And it seems not impossible, because I do know bands that do it. But it's very difficult.
It's tough. Like, just to give you a little example of how different things are now. We played, I remember a show, this would have been on our 3rd tour or 4th tour or something. We played, I think it was either Regina. I think it was Regina. We played our show, and there was like, 50 people there or whatever, or 75 people there. It was great, It was like, it was like the Boys and Girls Club or some all ages thing, or I can't even remember what it was. It was like maybe at a bar. But anyways, when a local came up to me afterwards, and he said, you guys are the first original band to come here, like not a cover band.
Yeah.
You're the first out of town original band to come since the last time you were here.
Wow.
Like, that's, and so you didn't have to be like, you were the only option, right? Like if
Wow.
you played a show in a place like, Edmonton or whatever, very often there wasn't that much else going on. So you could be kind of an unknown band. Excuse me, but you could, it was an event.
Yeah.
And so you could get those, 75 or 100 people, and you could get, the $200 to get to the next town. So, and it's not quite the same that way. There's stuff happening, you look at these towns, there's stuff happening all the time, Yeah, it's just a different time. It really is a different time.
My friends who are like serious in the industry, they're all going to England. They're all going to the UK and Germany, and I was trying to as well. We had 10 shows booked there before I had to slow things down. And it's like, it just seems like the population density and the travel distance equals itself out way more in those scenarios.
A friend of mine, the one I was talking about, his band plays in Europe quite a bit. So it's just a different thing. Yeah.
For me right now, that's the dream. But I mean, who knows, right?
Exactly.
But you were talking about the Much Music and being on rotation. And so when I went into college at Algonquin for video, television and video, it was still a thing. Much Music still existed. Yep. It was going away, but we still had people in our class that were like shooting music videos for bands and getting it on Much Music. Yeah. Stuff like that. It was a big deal.
It was a big deal, and it made such a difference for you. Like, I mean, we would play in these places, the middle of nowhere. And it was like kids would come from 100 miles around because they'd seen our video on Much Music, Yeah. Remember we played this one in Golden, BC, I think it was called? Golden? It's just some little tiny town in the middle of nowhere. I think it was Golden. It was a place, I can't remember. Anyways, there was a place like really, like a town with literally a population of like 200.
Okay.
And we played at like, the Elks Hall or whatever, all ages show or whatever. There was like 500 kids there, and they'd just come. This is a town with a population of only 200, but they had come from hours away because it was like, oh, we know this band. We've seen them on Much Music. So it was just a different thing. It was a different time,
Yeah, it was very different. And tell me about how, did you guys direct the videos? Did you find somebody? Was that through the record label? How did that video come to be?
We were really lucky because there's an amazing local filmmaker, Anthony Seck, and he approached us.
Okay.
He heard a song. He thought, oh, I can do this. And that was the first video, About to Drown. And it got like crazy amounts of rotation, at Much Music. And it was all shot in the pool at Carleton. It's online, if you go and you'll find it on YouTube. And so that was the first one. That really helped establish us, with that. And then he basically did all of our videos. Yeah. And I'm still in touch with him. He's still a very good friend, and he's helped us a lot. But we got really lucky. If we didn't have somebody as talented as him. And the same with Marty Jones, who recorded our records, if we, he did such a good job, and we were able to work with these people who understood we were doing everything on a shoestring and doing everything DIY and everything, and so we were able to do a lot.
Yeah, I tried to do a lot of it DIY myself back with Ginger Fox. And then I found with Taming Sorry, I was like, frig this.
It's hard.
We're not just going to do it. We're not going to do it that way anymore. And it just got expensive. Yeah. It just got too expensive.
Yeah. And you have to be practical and pragmatic about these things too. Like FurnaceFace actually did have a manager for a brief period of time when we really needed a man. We really needed someone in Toronto that could deal with, all of that kind of stuff. But, pre having that guy, we did all of that stuff ourselves. And even when we had a manager, we still did all of our, like Dave did all of our own books, all of our own financial stuff. We knew exactly, he definitely worked for us. It wasn't like he's our manager. Oh, we got to do what he says. Like we told him, we want you to do this. We want you to do this. We're going to tour at this point, blah, 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 And I think that was important. I don't know what the manager liked so much that we were the ones in charge and not him. But, it wasn't necessarily evil at the time. And then when we got rid of him, then we continued on the way we were, so. But there's, you have to be practical about these things, But we were able to, to do 5 records and, sell records and do all that kind of stuff and all those videos. And we spent almost no money on lawyers, which was, if you can get out of it without spending a bunch of money on lawyers or making a lot of money for a manager, all right.
Hey, man, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, like I was saying, it might be the fact you guys are friends, you could talk, you can reminisce and all that stuff. That might be the best piece of everything there.
Yeah, I feel lucky. I mean, it was like, it just happened at the right time. And Yeah, it was great.
And back then, like, promoting would be very different. So it would be putting posters up, I'm guessing.
Mailing posters out.
Mailing
You had to
posters
mail
out.
out posters, mail out records, you know. You had
Radio
to-
station interviews, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I would, and this was pre-cell phone. Like, we only had cell phone on the last couple of tours.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I would have to, I mean, the way we had it split up was Dave, the drummer, Dave, who owns Dave's Drum Shop.
Oh.
He did all of our financial. He was the long-term manager. So he did all the financial stuff. I did the short-term stuff and the promotion and the media, and Pat did the merchandise.
Okay.
So that's how we kind of had it divided up. And so, you know, we'd be up until, you know, we'd play these shows and get back to the hotel at like 2:30 in the morning and, you know, wind down, get to sleep. And the rest of the guys could crash, but I had to be up at like 7 or 8 in the morning to go down to the lobby, get on the payphone, open my notebook. Okay, confirming this interview, confirming what time this thing is, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, the rest of those guys would be crashed, but I'd do like 2 hours of promo work, forwarding the next shows and stuff like that, just on the payphone in the lobby. Then I get in the van, we'd go and I say, okay, 45 minutes from now, we've got to come into a gas station where I've got a phone because I've got an interview on CHFUCK or whatever it was. And so, you know, all those things had to be coordinated. It was different without cell phones, you know.
Yeah, very different.
Sounds primitive now, but that's just the way it was, you know.
No, and again, that's one of my favorite Tom Green bits too, is he talks about life before cell phones and being kids, and the way the information traveled was by mothers telling their kid something, then the kid would run out into the street, and then they'd tell their friend, who'd run down the street, who'd tell their friend. Yeah. And before you knew it, it had traveled down the whole street. Yeah. And I was like, I remember it. I got to live through all these changes that were rapidly happening as far as I was concerned. Because it just went cassette, CD, online Napster, you know, and it just kept changing.
Well, think about it even earlier than that. You know, you're talking about how kids try, you know, you just try to gather up information, you try to figure out what's going on. I remember a friend talking about how he had heard of punk rock, but he just didn't know what it was. But he knew it was something he was probably going to like. And so, you know, he was always reading Cream magazines and Parade magazine stuff and trying to figure it out. And every once in a while, there'd be a little picture or something like that. Mm-hmm. So eventually, and he'd heard of Kiss. And he knew that Kiss, like, threw up blood and stuff. And he knew that punk rockers threw up. And he said, well, this must be what punk is like, right? Kiss must be what punk is like. And he was just trying to and now, of course, anybody who's interested in anything, like you can be interested in the most obscure thing and you just, you know, you look it up, you Google it and suddenly you know everything there is about Christian death metal in Florida, right?
Yes.
You can figure out that whole scene, you know.
Yeah.
That's, and there all it is. And back, you know, when I was a little, you know, when I was a kid, when I first started getting into stuff, it was really hard to figure this stuff out. People just didn't know. You just didn't know. So you'd find a cool record at a record shop. It's like, oh, this looks really cool. And it's like, and then you'd buy it and you take it home and it'd be terrible. And you just did, how would you know, right?
You're just judging off the artwork.
You're like, oh, yeah, this looks pretty good. This is awful. That's live and learn, you know.
Oh my gosh, that's great. So that's how like the samplers would have come out, I guess, eventually, and order all the tapes you want off of this Columbia House stuff, you know?
Or, I mean, you just hear things on the radio. Like I asked my older brother, I said, how did you know? Like, how did you know to buy Paranoid? Like the week it came out, he didn't have any like parents telling him, oh, this is cool, or older brothers. And he said, well, I would hear a song on the radio. He said, I heard a song on the radio. So if you can believe it, Black Sabbath was played on like AM radio while he was like, you know, studying or whatever. And he said, oh, I'm going to buy that record. But how would you know? You know, you just guess.
My uncle and my mom and people from that, from the 60s and the 70s, they always tell me stories about seeing Queen live in Ottawa a lot. And I often hear stories about Zeppelin being seen a lot. But my uncles knew nothing about Sabbath. And the proof is like, I got their records. I own all their records. And they don't have any Sabbath. And they have so much cool stuff. Okay. And I'm like, why didn't you guys have Black Sabbath? Did you not know about them?
Pretty obscure at the time.
He said, he says it wasn't as popular as the other stuff. And also you'd hear like a lot of like, oh, it's devil worship. It's like demon stuff. And I was like,
I don't know how my brother found that at that time, but he said he heard the song on the radio and he bought the record. And that was all like literally like within a week or two that it came out. So
that's incredible.
I just got lucky that I was exposed to that stuff. Thank you, my brother Ken.
Yeah.
Changed my life.
Hell yeah. And so how old were you then, like when you were becoming a music aficionado or whatever you're going to call it? Like in grade 7, 8, were you into music at that time?
Oh, no, I was never into playing music at all, but I was hardcore into like listening to records and music at that time.
And then the Sex Pistols changed everything.
Yeah,
so your best friend shows
I
you
was
Sex
about
Pistols.
17, and he played me the Pistols, and it was like, oh, and he played me Dead Boys, and he played me a bunch of stuff, and that it was just like that was just a total. I was a different person. It was just boom overnight. I know it sounds cliche and it sounds stupid, but I literally was a different person the next day. It was like
the way
it changed everything.
Describing it, to me, it's like the way music used to work. It used to hit people, and you'd see all these characters at school, and all these characters fit together by music genre.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the way it was.
Things were a lot more tribal then, for
right?
Sure,
And nowadays, I find it's just like, well, as soon as I remember Napster, I remember every day after school when I was 13, we'd race home to my friend's house because he had a good computer with a good internet connection at the time. And we would just download random stuff that we would never have listened to ever. And then we'd go, oh, that's cool. Yeah. I love that. Download something else. And so now I look back and I'm like, damn it, we were destroying the industry. But I had no,
learning.
We didn't know. We were just having fun. We were dumb kids, So you're finding Sex Pistols, you're getting into that. And then, so FurnaceFace is not the first band, it's Fluid Waffle. When does Fluid Waffle get made?
We formed that band in the fall of 84, and we were a band up until basically the spring. The final shows were the spring of 89, so that's 5 years, almost 5 years. And what happened was there was Fluid Waffle was this weird. It was sort of an odd band. We really did not know what we were doing. We didn't know how to write songs. We didn't know how to do anything. And as I mentioned before, the lead singer, the frontman, Steve, he was really young. He was only about 15. And so me and Pat and Dave and Steve was the front guy. And we did a couple Canadian tours, a bunch of American stuff. And we had a couple of singles out and an EP. And but, it was really a learning thing, like it was like we did not know how to sing or play or anything like that. Dave, the drummer, was a good drummer. But it was just, it's weird kind of art rock, strange people not knowing not knowing what they're doing. And then what happened was the frontman, Steve, basically left the band. And so we were left as a trio, me and Dave and Pat.
Okay.
And Pat and I kind of looked at each other and it was like, well, I don't want to sing. And he's like, well, I don't want to sing. It's like, I guess we'll have to split it in half, if we didn't have, and so Pat and I had to suddenly sing, I was like, oh God, this is going to be brutal. And, so we split the singing through FurnaceFace. And so then that band formed basically over the summer of 89. And then the first single came out in the fall. And right away we hit the ground running because we'd learned everything from the previous band. So we had a van. We knew how to tour. We knew how to do all that stuff. And we hit the ground running right away. And right away, that band was sort of got traction right away. And then, like I said, then May 91 or whenever the Nirvana thing happened, suddenly that all changed. And then the final, so 5 records and the final tour was in 2000. Yeah, wow. It's great. It was fantastic. 11 years or 10 years or whatever.
It sounds incredible.
It was super fun. Yeah. And it was really hard work too. I mean, it almost, it was brutal, but at the same time, it was really great. It was one of the best times of my life for sure.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people think touring is easy, or a lot of people think touring's like vacationing or something like that. But I normally ask my touring guests, like, so did touring ruin your life? Because I keep getting that response.
I personally love touring.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was great for me. I mean, it was a lot of work, but I loved it. I love driving. I find it very therapeutic. I love traveling. I like playing shows and everything. It was exhausting and it was difficult, but I mean, one of the things about touring is that once that first day when you get in the van, you don't have any more decisions to make, really. Like you're not saying where you're eating. You're not saying where you're going. You're just on the train and the train is rolling and that's what you're doing. I still had to do all of the stuff I had to do. But you don't worry about anything else. You're just like, okay, we're doing this. Doesn't matter where I am tomorrow. I'm just, you're suddenly in a machine that's going for the next 30 days or whatever,
Well, you guys achieved what I call lightning in a bottle. So it's super hard to ever replicate it. But when it happens, it's pure magic, right? So you guys just bottled all this amazingness in the music. Then you said you got lucky. I don't know how this works, but I have had it similar where one person can change everything. You meet one person and all of a sudden they make one slight decision and these doors will open. And it's a bizarre thing. And you go and you say, well, it wouldn't have happened any other way, would it have? But maybe it would have. That's the thing I don't know about it. It's like, because I think there is truth. I had one guy from the London Choir Boys tell me many years ago, he was like, he said the cream rises to the crop. The
cream rises to the top.
Thank you. And I was like, yeah, you're right. He's like, one way or the other, it comes up. Like, if it's really, really good, it'll find its way. But what I've found with this podcast is, in today's world especially, it's very hard to rise.
It really is. There's so much stuff out there, it's really hard to distinguish yourself from other stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what I said before, FurnaceFace could have done the exact same thing 5 years earlier or 5 years later, and nothing would have happened. The timing was perfect.
You guys were innovative, though. Did you know you were innovative? Did you know that you were doing things a little bit differently? I
think to a certain extent we kind of did, because we were really conscious of, we're not just going to do one thing. Like, there were so many bands at that time that were just basically kind of emulating one thing. They really liked,
right,
blah blah, but whatever band, and a lot of them sort of kind of became, did that kind of thing. And in FurnaceFace, and I attribute a lot of this to Dave Dudley, the drummer. He would constantly say, well, we should do something like this, we should do something like that. And so, we had some stuff that was very, sort of grunge rock, heavy rock type thing with riffs and everything like that. But we did really early sample stuff and sort of rap style kind of things where Dave would play along with a drum beat, which was, not a lot of bands, especially like, smaller bands like us did at the time. So we had a lot of samples, and we also had like just a variety. Like, our first record had a ska song on it, had some really heavy stuff. It had some just really just weird, almost weenish type stuff. Now that I look back,
that's an excellent comparison.
It had some really, there's a lot of humor in it. It's
yes.
Like we always had a lot of humor, and a lot of bands in the 90s, especially the grunge era, were very serious.
Yes.
And we did not go down that road. There's even some almost country-ish kind of things or whatever. And so, there's a real, I think one of the things I'm really proud about with FurnaceFace is we did not stick to one thing. And I think that's when people come to our shows, and it's like, we'd play something really heavy, and then we kind of morph into Pat and I put down our guitars, and we'd do sort of a rap thing. Then we'd go back into a thing that would be more of a dancey thing, and then like a funny ballad or whatever. And so I think that's one of the things I'm really proud about with FurnaceFace, is that we didn't kind of just stick, oh, this is going to be successful, we can do that,
Okay.
But at the same time, I think that's also, we paid the price for that, because we were a little harder for like Much Music or a record company or whatever to pitch and say, oh, we can market them like this.
Right.
We were just a little bit too odd. But we were never interested in that anyway, so we didn't really care.
But that's why Ween's a good comparison. Like, they're a great band that a lot of people should know about, but a lot of people don't, just because they didn't get the same marketing,
I mean, I did not know Ween at the time, but I only use that as a reference.
It's a good one.
Of that, that they do different things.
Yeah, and they should be way more known. And I remember vaguely, so the day that Kurt Cobain dies, and so I would have been maybe 6, I think. And I remember my parents hosted a youth group in town, and about a parade of teenagers ended up at my house that day, and bawling in tears.
It was a big deal.
Bawling. Yeah. Boys, girls, it didn't matter. They were just coming in trying to, what's happened to Kurt? He's gone to hell. Is he dead forever? My poor parents just trying to tell them it's going to be okay. Yeah. It's all right, but I mean.
Yeah, it was an unusual time for sure.
Right. I mean, and so did you guys get to skirt around a lot of what was going on in drug abuse in bands or any of that? Or did you still get impacted by that in some way or another?
Well, I mean, one of the things is that, because we'd been a band, we had a lot of experience before. And also we were a couple years older because we've been doing that. So there were so many bands who it's like, they heard Nirvana, they formed a band with their high school, friends, they were playing these things, and they were a couple of years younger than us. And there was a certain naivety. Like I said, they would sign anything a record company put in front of them or whatever. And they all thought that they were going to be rich and stuff like that. And we were a little bit like, well, there's this thing happening and we'll ride it, but get real. This is an anomaly. This is a skew in the thing. It's going to go back to playing to 50 people again, And they didn't believe that. They all thought they were going to retire in, California or whatever. But I think we were a little bit more pragmatic about the whole thing.
I think you were too. I mean, you guys are still here, though. You're still making a massive impact on the music scene. And so we'll kind of transition now. How do you become Slo Tom? Or were you already Slo Tom?
No. Well, I was in a country band pre-FurnaceFace.
Okay.
Called the Slurpees. And I'd always written, like, none of the stuff in FurnaceFace really suited my country thing, because we wrote together. But at the same time, I was writing these kind of silly country songs or whatever. They weren't suitable for FurnaceFace, and I was just piling them away. And so because I'd had that early experience in a country band, and I really liked that, I always thought, well, someday I'll probably more interested in doing this. Like, probably not going to want to play punk rock until I'm old,
Yeah.
And so when FurnaceFace ended, actually before FurnaceFace ended, I did my first country record, Slo Tom and the Horseshit Heroes.
Yes.
Which is a live record. And Jim Bryson was the guitar player. Jeff Taylor was the drummer. Dave Dudley was the drummer. Jeff Taylor was the bass player. And a guy named Graham Collins was the piano player. And that's online. You can go to Bandcamp and see that. And so that's a live record. And it's the country band I put together at that time. It wasn't exact. I'm really proud of that record, but it wasn't, I hadn't quite zeroed in on what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also, Dave and I and my friend Blake, did a metal band called Manpower. And we did that for a while, and I enjoyed that. But I was more interested in the long term, not playing bass, playing guitar.
I think it might be that you're so artistically open to all these different genres of music that may have like that thing is you're not satisfied just doing the one genre. And a lot of these bands that went on and they just did one thing. Yeah. It's kind of like Dave Grohl, right? Like he's still doing the exact same thing that he was doing all those years ago. And I don't think that was going to satisfy you in certain ways.
I'm really fortunate right now because excuse me, with the Handsome Devils right now, it's in some ways it's a pretty pure country band, and we can play the stuff with lap steel, and it'll sound like
beautiful
Williams and that kind of stuff. But that band is versatile enough that we can actually play stuff that is verging on kind of, I don't know. It's an interesting band. It's fun, and we have songs that are like, I don't want to say heavy, but they're much more rock and much more heavy. And so if we're playing at the Dom for like a sketchy,
my favorite,
those sort of things, we'll skew the set to be more like Social Distortion or something like that.
Okay.
And then if we play at a highbrow place like, the Redbird or whatever, like that, well, we'll do the way more of the, soft seat, the lap steel, the really hardcore country stuff. So it's a pretty versatile band. I don't think there's that many bands that can go all the way from the Redbird. I don't know if you've ever been to the Redbird, but
I haven't.
It's a beautiful
I
venue.
know. I've been.
It's very people sit there, they listen to you, they're drinking wine, that kind of thing, all the way to the Dom where it's the sketchiest crust punks, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really proud that we can kind of span that. So it's fun. It's great. I mean, I can basically write anything for the Devils and they will play it. Circles around me. It's great.
Oh, that's amazing. And the thing is, like, the songwriting is really good and it's on another level. And I do feel like there's elements of folk in your writing, but it's just overrun by the fact that, the words are fantastic. That's what I would put.
I spent a lot of time on
the storytelling and the lyrics and the way it unfolds. I think it tells that, like, you've written a few songs. That's kind of what I'm saying. And I mean, you guys do play great shows. I saw you guys did art on the waterfront.
Yeah.
That was in Chesterville.
Yeah.
That's where I grew up.
We've done that a few times. It's great. And it's Tick from C
with the Barnstorm.
ACU, with the Barnstorm. Yeah. He's been a huge supporter all the way since Fluid Wolf.
Yeah, I met Tick one time when I played across the street there at McCloskey's. And they don't do anything at McCloskey's anymore, sadly. But I have some great memories in there while they were open.
Yeah, we played McCloskey's many times. We got some stories from
Right,
that.
right.
That's one of the craziest places we've ever played.
And it will remain so.
Bananas.
I remember, great times there. And I grew up there. It's an interesting place. Well, not the most cultural. So when I was there, I'll tell you folks about Chesterville. So there's a 1,400 person town or so. And I went to a school called North Dundas up the highway. And it's just got a school across the road from it that's now closed. And on a graveyard and a graveyard. So you couldn't skip. You couldn't run away. Go, right? There's just the frickin' graveyard. And there was a pond that the farmer owned that people used to go swimming in. And then on the PA it came and the principal was like, don't swim in there. It's filled with chicken shit. Like filled with it. And people were like, oh, and so it was just not the most cultural place. Like when the girls from South Korea came and stayed, 4 or 5 of them came on an exchange program. They were like celebrities because they were just different, right. And people say, well, were people racist there? And I'll say, well, it's hard to be racist when no one else there is any other race. Right. But yes, they were. And, same thing with gay people and all that. Like, I'm sure it's come a long way since then, but that's what I try and tell people about Canada. You've got these cities, and then around it, you have all these little towns that make it up, and the way of thinking is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. When I tried to live in Toronto, it was too much of a culture shock, and people told me there, they said, you have an accent. I said, I have an accent? Oh yeah, you have a country twang to your voice. And then the producer told me the same thing
Ottawa Valley. You got the Ottawa Valley accent.
Like, I don't hear it whatsoever, but as soon as we go to Toronto, they're like, oh yeah, I can hear it. Mm-hmm. So just...
That's interesting.
Yeah. And you did the Ottawa Tulip Festival. That's back 2003, 2005.
I kind of hosted that, and Manpower actually played with Billy Talent at one of those ones, and FurnaceFace have played the Tulip Festival many times, of course. Yeah.
Gosh, I love Billy Talent. And again, it's such a small community. It's like you can take, in the music world, like you could take a band like Billy Talent and I go, oh, well, they're the ones who discovered the Lazies. And the Lazies were the ones who gave Taming Sorry their first opening gig for like a sold out show in Ottawa. Right. Like that's how the music industry in Canada works. Mm-hmm. And then I tell people like, well, the first time I ever sang, I was at Algonquin College at the Observatory. And it was Moist playing on stage there, but they were doing rock band karaoke. So it's just Moist minus David Usher. Right. And they're not telling anybody. They're just up there just taking requests and you go up and sing with them.
Right.
So I went up and I sang Don't Stop Believing. So the guy's like, dude, you should probably try singing. Like, we're in Moist. You should try. Like, we thought you were going to fuck this up really bad. Yeah. But you did pretty good. Wow, so that was like one of the first times, So again, you take any Canadian band, I find, and it will play somehow into people's stories.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows everybody after a while,
Right?
So.
I mean, the Horseshoe is still the Horseshoe. I'm sure you guys would have played in Toronto back in the day, playing those types of venues. Times. Whereas, like, when we first started playing Toronto, all the venues we played are closed. Mm-hmm. So every single venue we played in, like, the first year of our band going to Toronto, they're all gone. And it's just because it's such a difficult climate to stick around in, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything changes, right?
And Zaphods, how long were you part of that Zaphods family?
I don't know, maybe about 8 years I did sound there. I did up until about 2 years. Actually, I should be able to tell you. I think I started around 2001, something like that, doing sound there. Mm. And then I left about 2 years before they closed, they changed, or a year before they changed. Something like that, yeah. Yeah, and now I'm at House of Targ, and I didn't really do anything between because I didn't really want to do sound anywhere except House of Targ, and they had a guy, but now I'm at House of Targ. I feel really, really fortunate. I love being a part of that family.
I love House of Targ, and I always bring people there. I go there for my birthday just because it's easy to decide, and I just, I'm just going to go zone out and have some fun. And catching shows there is fantastic, too, because you kind of get a little bit of that punk vibe being in that basement there, and sure. It's a cool vibe.
I always say it's like, for anybody out there, should go to the House of Targ, which is an Ottawa venue owned and run by punk rockers. They have pinballs, punk rock, and pierogies. They have a restaurant that serves only pierogies. You got to check it out. It's really great. And lots of hardcore, lots of metal, lots of punk rock. It's great.
Great music every night. Anytime I've ever gone there, just like the soundtrack, whatever they're spinning is just, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you
I
can
really feel lucky to be part of it. It's great.
God, yeah. And I got to tell you, I love most of the venues in this city. And again, it's similar to that being so the Rainbow, for example, like everything that Stacey has done for me over the years is just incredible. And everything that the people at Live on Elgin have done for me over the years, just incredible. And like I said, Eugene and Zaphods, I mean, when that left, I really didn't know how the scene would move forward, but it did. It found a way. And I played 27 Club January, I think, and the sound wasn't right. So it made me very mad.
I've never seen a show in there. I've been in once. Scotchy from the Dom just took me over to show it because I'd never been in there since Zaphods but I've never seen a show there.
You realize it's not Zaphods anymore. As soon as you go in, everything is like a new decor and everything. So your mind is looking around going, well, that's where that was. And that's where that was. And
but we're fortunate right now in Ottawa. I mean, there's a lot of places to play. I mean, if you add it up, everybody says, oh, there's no place to play. But it's like, there's a lot of places to play, I mean, from, like I was saying, the Redbird and Irene's, and there's Saw Gallery, and there's De Cuff, and there's 27, and the Chateau Lafayette does stuff. I'm playing with Lucky Ron this Friday.
A legend.
Saturday. Yeah. And, there's the Atomic Rooster. There's just so many places right now. So
now the Laugh
and the Dom.
Yes, the Laugh, you got to work your way up, folks. Don't try and go book your first show there. That's probably not.
And they do more acoustic stuff and things. It's not so much band.
Incredible people.
The Monday nights they do band. They do the Dave Bignell's band is amazing. You get a chance to check that out. It's really good.
Incredible music there all the time. Anytime I've ever again gone in there. And what I've been telling bands is the same thing. Like you said, like De Cuff, and I tell bands like go sell out De Cuff.
Yeah. And the Dom. I mean, the Dom does great shows. It's fun to play, and it's a scene.
Yep. Go sell at the Dom. Go sell out Live on Elgin. And like once you've done that with those three venues on like several times, you can move on.
Yeah.
But you'll have built your audience. Through that group. And like I've told people, like one of the things I'm most proud of in the city is that Taming Sorry has we have our set list framed up at Live on Elgin just because we sold out our show there. And I was just, that's amazing that they do that type of thing because it reminds me of what the stuff you were doing at Zaphods. It kept me going back and saying, okay, well, I know Tom's going to be there. This will be worth my effort tonight, regardless of who comes. I'm going to get to talk to Slo Tom. I'm going to get my album. We're going to get our set recorded. It's going to be worthwhile.
None of the sound techs wanted to do those Monday nights. But I was just like, this is amazing because it's like you meet like twice as many people, right?
Yeah.
Instead of 2 or 3 bands, 5 bands sometimes. And I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, it's like, I don't know.
You had the right attitude, though. A lot of sound men, I think, have I don't know if they've just been hurt a lot. They've just been burnt a lot, right?
I've been trying to raise the bar.
And some soundmen, they're more comfortable doing it. They know there's going to be some ups and downs. There's going to be some people who don't know what the hell is going on. I was always one of those people. I was a vocalist. So I was telling people the other day, like, gosh, I had horrible events happen with music, but you learn and you move on.
It's the only way to progress, right?
So you guys released in Slo Tom and the Handsome Devils released Doing Hard Time.
Yep.
February 28th.
Yep.
Okay.
I think it was in March. Yeah, I guess it was February.
That's the end. It's basically March.
Yeah, that's the most recent record.
And it went number 1 on CKCU.
Yeah, we got lots of play and people seemed to like it. It was a hard record to get out because we'd recorded it pre-COVID. And then people were, different. Everybody was busy, but we finally got it out. And we are in the process of working on the next one right now. Yeah. So there's another 14 songs and we're going to add a few. So we have 2 records sort of in the works. And I have a solo record that I recorded during COVID too. So there's a whole bunch of bed stuff that we're slowly picking away at.
Would you want to tour again? Would you want to take this album?
What my deal with the guys is like, they want to be within an hour and a half. So the Ottawa and they want to come home at nights. Now, we've broken that rule for Kingston Peterborough. So we're playing Kingston Peterborough now.
Good.
So a little bit further. But I don't really like. I'm flying out to Victoria and I'm playing a couple of shows there in January with Carolyn while I visit my family's out there. So and I can do those odds and ends of things. But if I was going to tour, I would do like a solo thing. I don't think the guys, they don't want to get in a van and drive across the country. I would, but
I don't blame them, but I do too. I want to as well, but like I'm always the shortest, smallest guy, so I'm always stuck in the middle seat, and it just sucks, you know? I'm like, give me the window, please. No, Warren, you're the smallest.
That's funny.
It's the way it goes. So yeah, you got new music coming soon. You're at currently doing sound at House of Targ, where people should definitely book shows and go. Also, I think there's a great scene that's built there, like a lot of young bands who are awesome. Passenger Princess, etc.
Yeah,
they
all that snowman people.
Right, they're coming through
scene.
there, and they're building a very wicked scene. And again, I think that's amazing to see in Ottawa, because when I kind of came around in 07, 08, I kind of found like the scene was discombobulated. Now, everyone at Zaphods I looked up to at the time, and I still look up to, and I've had a few of them. Spag, I still got to get Spag on the show. I still got to get Spag on. But who did I just have on not too long ago? Gosh, I can't remember. But he's a big star now too. And so everybody who was at Zaphods back in the day, I thought was amazing. And you guys all had careers and we're doing stuff in the industry. And you should still be proud of that. Like bands today, like I've worked my butt off for a long time, but national tour, never.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel lucky it was the right time, you know,
dude,
to have that experience.
Right time, right place, right music. And you have to remember too, right? Like if the music wasn't right, then none of it would have happened.
Yeah. And we worked really hard. And we also realized that it was an opportunity. It's like, oh, this is like this whole thing that's happened. We can run with this, you know, and we were able to do that. And a lot of bands would have been like, oh, I can't necessarily do it. But we were just in the right place at the right time, and we were able to capitalize on the opportunity.
There you go. And it still happens. You can see Ottawa rock bands like Villavant getting taken out on tour and going across the country. And I remember she had to drop a tour with one band, and she announced that, and everyone was like, oh my God, why? And then the next day she announced, oh, I'm with this band on tour, you know? And you're like, it's great to see, like, it's still happening in Ottawa. Great things happen. And the way you did things, like you speak about your career, like very low ego, like you said, like you took it not for granted, but you took it in stride. Like this happened, we worked hard, but it's not going to change who I am necessarily. And again, I think that's amazing that it worked out for you that way, that you're able to like cement yourself in this community and get at least some respect. I hope you know that you've at least obtained respect of musicians in this community.
Yeah, well, you know, I feel really fortunate. You know, the Ottawa music scene has been so good to me, and you know, I don't want to keep harping on this right place at the right time, but so often I have, and Pat and Dave, the same thing. They have people come up to it. It's like, my first show ever, my big brother took me to Porter Hall at Carleton. I was 12. I'd never been to a show before, and we saw FurnaceFace. And it was like, my life has been ruined ever since. It was like, and so we were just at the exact right, or people will come up to you and say, you know, the only reason I survived high school was because of your band. And it's like, oh my God, you know. So we just feel really, really lucky to be, you know, like to have been kind of a part of that whole thing. And so, yeah, I just feel really fortunate. And you know, you feel like, well, it's good that people took it as a really positive experience in their lives. It's like, oh, you know, because of your band, I was exposed to this and this and this. And that's how I ended up, you know, meeting all my friends. And this is how I ended up, you know, with this or whatever. So, and coincidentally, my best friend, the guy that originally played me the Pistols and stuff like that, his band had a similar experience with that, where they were just sort of in the right place at the right time and just kind of changed you know, like people still come up to him and say, you know, you're the reason, you know, kind of thing, which is really flattering, you know?
That's super amazing. And I kind of, if you can make an impact in anyone's life like that, I think it's so cool.
I feel pretty lucky. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, the right place, the right time, I totally agree with it. But again, you got to do the right music because there's a lot of bands that would have loved it to be the right place, right time for them. Yeah. But the music was right. The connection was right. Everything was there.
And you have to be able to do all the stuff. Like, you can't just have good songs. No. You have to be able to
connect with an audience, tour, market,
perform them really well. Yep. And you have to be able to get them on a record. So that a lot of bands had great songs, but never had a good record. You know, like they just never could capture themselves. Or they had a good record, but they were never that good live. Or they were good live and had a good record, but they never got videos. So they never really got that thing. So you had to have, at that time, you really had to you had to be really well organized or have a manager that could organize you. You had to, be able to tour, be able to do a live show, be able to put out a good record, and be able to make good videos. And if you had 4 of those 5 things, it wouldn't help you.
Yeah.
You really had to have all of those things or it just wouldn't work.
I agree. When's the next time that people can see Slo Tom and the Handsome Devils?
Well, we just played, in the last couple of weeks, we played Smiths Falls and Bowie's. We played at the Toucan in Kingston.
Love it.
And we played up at the Cafe in Wakefield. Right now, I have not booked anything because the guys have been so busy working on different stuff. But in the spring or, New Year's and spring, we'll be doing like around the Ottawa Valley show. I haven't booked I was waiting for a date. And that's why I hadn't pulled the trigger on an Ottawa show yet, but we will be doing an Ottawa show somewhere in March or April kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. And I love the Toucan. It's a great little compact stage, too. But the thing is the crowd there is it's built into the venue.
We had a great show there. It was super fun.
They're snobby. If you're bad, they'll tell you. That's the thing about Kingston, right?
And
there you go. And don't ever try and folks, if you're listening, don't try and sing the hip there unless you're going to kill it. Don't. They'll tell you. Yeah. Now, I mean, I didn't get told. I got told I did it.
I was also able to play at Wolf Island with Carol and Mark, my friend Carol and Mark.
Nice.
Who I'm playing with in Victoria in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. Victoria, that's going to be beautiful.
Yeah,
that's going to be an amazing experience. Well, thank you so much for coming on this show.
Such a pleasure. I'm glad I made it here without killing myself in the snowstorm.
Yes. Thank you for driving through that. You'll have to be careful going home in this Canadian winter here. But I just wanted to say thank you again so much for everything you've done in the scene and the impact you had on me and music. It has been immeasurable, and it will continue. It will continue, and I'll always speak highly of what you did back then. And that goes. Just imagine, I thought super highly of you without even knowing about the music.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then once I dive into the music, it's I gain a whole new respect and a whole new perspective on it.
Right.
But even then, your commitment to the scene and to having it be a positive place, it made a big difference.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This is high praise.
Yeah, you deserve it, man. And I'll be coming in with my mom soon to Spaceman's. She wants to get a new acoustic, and I told her, well, we're gonna go to Spaceman's.
We'll get you set up.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Real pleasure.
And thank you out there for watching. And we'll see you all again next time on All Worn Out. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.